It's your boy Nipsey Hussle right here live and direct on Slauson with the Slauson Boys. Hottest shit on the street.
The hip-hop stars ultimately and finally death. Nipsey Hussle was murdered in broad daylight outside
I was been supposed to fold all this pressure. I was been supposed to change up. Nigga, what would I look like? Y'all niggas got beat up, stomped out, fucked over in the back of these buildings all the way down to Hyde Park. This 60th right here. This is where the enemies ain't gonna come. They not gonna want no funk on this block. You feel me? But other than that.
Hermes was born August 15, 1985 in South LA's Crenshaw district. Although his parents separated, he grew up with both his mom and dad in his life, and they only lived a few minutes apart. His family consisted of himself, his little sister, and his older brother, who he would later refer to as Black Sam. Hip-hop was always a part of his life. As early as 6 years old, he was already memorizing songs by his favorite rap group, Criss-Cross. At the time, a lot of young artists were getting signed to labels and blowing up, so as long as he could remember, his only goal was to make music and sign a record deal. As a child, he was already writing his first rhymes, expecting that this would happen to him too, and when it didn't, he decided to give up.
I thought I was gonna be like a young artist signed when I was a little kid. I guess when I was probably 8, 9, my goal was that by the time I'm 12, 13, I'll be signed and cracking.
Growing up, his older brother Sam was always a huge influence on him. He looked up to him. As he grew into his teens and saw how Sam hustled for different streams of money, this motivated him to go get it as well. In 6th grade, he was already working his first job shining shoes at a shop around the corner in Slauson. Some days he was making almost $100. This was a lot of money for a kid his age, and even if he wanted to spend it all, he couldn't, so he credits this to teaching him how to stack and save his money. This only made him want to make more, so he started selling candy and mowing lawns on the side too. Even though he enjoyed making money, in the back of his head he knew he still wanted to pursue music. A friend who lived across the street from him was the only one on the block who owned a computer. He used his money he saved up to buy a microphone, and at just 11 years old, he recorded his first song ever over a Snoop Dogg instrumental. His mom saw how interested he was in music, so she ended up signing him up for a program that took kids to music studios and taught them how to use the equipment. Because of this, he gradually started to learn how to engineer his own music as well as make beats. His beats were actually what started to get him recognized in his neighborhood, as his friends started asking him for production. Despite all the side hustles he did to make cash, he still couldn't afford to buy his own studio equipment, as it was very expensive back then. So at 13, he started exploring other options. This is where he made his entrance to the gang culture.
It was tricky, I was trying to get low. I felt guilty asking mama for shoes. Weekends at my dad's house, granny face on the news. So when I knew that LAPD was true.
More specifically, he joined the Rolling 60s Crips, which was the most dominant gang in the Crenshaw area. With this came his introduction to selling drugs, fights, and shootouts. But in the back of his head, he always knew he had a bigger picture, and he knew he didn't want to do this forever. In the meantime, he was making a lot more money now, and he could afford to invest in himself, unlike before. Because of this, he ultimately dropped out of high school in 10th grade. Although he was capable of finishing it, it just wasn't the focus at the time. His mother of course didn't react well to this, and even changed the locks on the doors after kicking him out of the house. He moved around the corner to his grandma's, but he says this only provoked him more, as he was now unsupervised and could hang on the block all day. Being in the streets never distracted him from chasing his dream of music though. At about 15, he really started to consider it a way out. Initially, he was rapping under the name Concept. He ended up forming a rap group with his friends, which included a guy named Brian, who you might know as Kid Ink now. Their group was called the Stranded Minds. They ended up getting their hands on enough equipment to record and brought it back to their friend Rimpa's house. This is where their grind started. One day he was recording and realized he needed a name that better suited the way he lived. A friend of his named Baby Gooch told him to give him a few days and he'd come up with a name for him. He ended up leaving the house that day to make some money, and when they all met up a few days later, Baby Gooch saw how easy it was for him to make cash, and he told him to rap under the name Nipsey Hussle. This was a reference to Nipsey Russell, who was a poet and comedian in the 1950s, and they just changed it around to better suit his lifestyle. Meanwhile this is going on, Nipsey is still very much in the streets and still gangbanging, and his reputation was starting to spread. He dropped his first mixtape in 2003 titled Fuck the Middleman, which he sold out the trunk of his car in the hood and performed at small parties on the block. This was also around the time that his mindset started to change. When he was 18, his family took a 3-month trip back to his father's homeland, and when he saw how people were living over there, he realized how blessed he actually was. When he returned, life in the streets were also becoming more dangerous. He was involved in a shootout that was caught on camera. Nipsey was never identified, but a few of his close friends were. When he saw the sentences they received, he realized this life was only going to lead him to jail or death, and this moment changed his life. He sold his white Lincoln to a friend, and he and his brother went 50-50 on building their own studio. He knew it was time to invest everything he had into himself and his brand. In early 2005, he filed the paperwork to start his own label called Slauson Boys. With his own spot to record at, he was able to turn out music much faster. In December of 2005, he released his mixtape Slauson Boys Volume 1. He printed out copies and gave them to everyone he knew to help pass them out. His pitch was, if it's whack, throw it out your window. And because of this, he says a lot of people actually took it and listened.
That was my sales pitch. I'd be on Crenshaw and Slauson in front of the Master Burger. I just thought it was so many people that was, oh, check my CD out, buy my music.
Yeah.
I wanted to distinguish myself. So I'm like, if it's whack, throw it out the window. I'm gonna sit right here. And a lot of times they'll be like, just cause I said that, like, man, let me check that out, huh?
Family broken, so I stand with my niggas. Showed up to every shootout, but I ran for my feelings. No time for those, I got a plan to get millions.
His buzz locally started to form, but it was still very small. A friend of his named Big U saw the work he had been putting in and offered to manage him. This ended up being a great move for Nipsey, as Big U had many connections. One of those was a man named Steve Lobel, who heard the Slauson Boys mixtape and loved it. Now Nipsey had 2 managers. Steve and Big U pushed his vision like it was their own. His managers even got him his first taste of the mainstream in 2006 on Tupac's posthumous album, Pac's Life, where Nipsey featured on a song. But just as everything was going well, he was still facing setbacks. In November of that year, his brother's house got raided by the cops, and they ended up taking all their studio equipment. Nipsey ended up facing charges as well for a shotgun they found. This setback caused him to hit the streets again to make some money for a lawyer, but luckily for him, he already had a lot of music he previously recorded. He put that music on a demo tape, and one day he was on the block when rapper The Game pulled up to a red light. Nipsey gave The Game his demo tape, and he ended up calling him that night to work. The Game wasn't the only one taking notice of Nipsey's hustle, and a film director even reached out that same year, casting him in the Bone Thugs and Harmony movie, I Tried. While on set filming the movie, he would meet Johnny Shipes, who had his own label under Sony and Epic Records. He was the only person at the time who was willing to take a chance on Nipsey because of his gang affiliation.
And he was like, well, there's this kid Nipsey Hussle, but he's a real street dude. I don't know if you're gonna wanna, he's in the mix out there. So I looked him up and he had like one song on there. This song called Bullets Ain't Got No Names. And I was like, yo, this is fucking incredible.
To the people, I'm a hero unsung. Good thing I don't want fame, I want funds. But if they say my name, the bell rung. I've been through so much pain, I feel numb.
But once again, trouble found its way back into his life. Right after signing his deal, he was at a party where an underage female falsely accused him and others of sexual acts. Now that he had money from his deal, he was able to hire a good lawyer and beat the case within 2 months, so it was time to push his music to another level. He was getting buzz for a track he had out titled Bullets Ain't Got No Name, which was produced by Kid Ink. This would also be the title of his first mixtape under the label, which dropped in April of 2008 and got his foot into the industry. Now other West Coast rappers like Game and Snoop Dogg started co-signing his movement and made songs with him. He followed this tape up with Volume 2, which had the song Hussle in the House. In the music video to this song, they all wore Crenshaw sweaters, and after this video dropped, people started asking where they could get one. Nipsey, Black Sam, and Fat started selling the shirts on the corner, but the police kept confiscating the clothes, so they ended up leasing a store which would become the original Marathon clothing store. Throughout 2009, Nipsey continued to drop music as his buzz was rising fast, but he was still chasing a mainstream name, despite working with Snoop Dogg, Drake, and many others. In 2010, Epic Records had budget cuts, and instead of throwing Nipsey off the label, they decided to give him his own imprint, which birthed the All Money In Records. This momentum got him featured on the 2010 XXL Freshman list alongside J-Rock, Big Sean, and J. Cole. At this point, his name was getting recognized, but his music still wasn't selling the kind of numbers he and the label expected. He ended up deciding to stay fully independent and do it all himself. Wasting no time, he dropped 2 more mixtapes on his own, the Slauson Boys and the Marathon. Although they performed well, the celebration was short-lived, as he and 4 others were taken into custody after an altercation with the police. During the altercation, the police actually fired shots at Black Sam, but they missed and nobody was injured. All 5 were arrested, and Black Sam ended up going away for a few years, resulting in them losing the clothing store for a while. But Nipsey was making moves on the outside. He released his Marathon Continues tape, which did very well and re-entered his name in the LA music scene. One thing about Nipsey that made him stand out was his business mindset. So although his career was going well, it was often that he would buy or open up new businesses like Fatburger, a cell phone shop, and a hair store all in his neighborhood. But he also did this with his music and made hip-hop history with it. In 2013, he announced the release of his newest mixtape, Crenshaw, but this was unlike any release we've ever seen. He stated he would only produce 1,000 copies and sell them for $100 each. Initially, he received backlash from just about everyone for this idea, as it sounded crazy, but he was ready to prove everyone wrong.
I can put you on a pedestal and motivate you on a different level too. I need your energy for what I'm going through. You can balance me and I can balance you.
Just 1 month later, he opened up a pop-up shop in LA for the release of the tape. He sold every copy that same night, with Jay-Z even buying 100 of them. This was also his first project to break the Billboard 100 and peaked at number 63. For the next few years, Nipsey was touring the world and building his brand. He released a few tapes, but he started to shift his energy toward building his other businesses up. In 2017, he opened up more stores, including a seafood market, the World on Wheels roller rink, and officially reopened his clothing store once again. But he had a surprise up his sleeve. Almost 15 years after his first mixtape, he finally announced his debut album, Victory Lap. In February of 2018, Victory Lap was released and hit number 4 on the Billboard. It sold 53,000 copies its first week and got him nominated for a Grammy. In addition, 2 singles from his album would go gold, giving him his first ever plaques to hang on the wall. Things were going extremely well, momentum was high, and he was finally getting the recognition he deserved all over the US, not just LA. He collabed with Puma, invested in multiple apps, and even bought the entire plaza that his Marathon store was connected to. This was a huge accomplishment for him, as he said this was the same plaza he used to hustle by, and now he owned it legally.
The space and created the Marathon store, but then we just bought the building recently. So
you bought the building.
Yeah, we bought the whole building, yeah.
His single Racks in the Middle with Roddy Ricch dropped and was his highest peaking song to date. Things were looking better than ever for Nipsey. But on March 31st, 2019, Nipsey woke up and headed to the clothing store to help out a friend who was just released from prison and give him some free clothes. He was hanging out and taking pictures with fans like a normal day. At 2:52 p.m. he tweeted, "Having strong enemies is a blessing." But unknowingly, this would be the last thing he said on social media.
It's a huge loss for the rap and hip hop community. He wasn't, just a rapper.
Grammy-nominated rapper Nipsey Hussle shot and killed outside his own clothing store in Los Angeles.
Gun violence has taken the life of Los Angeles rapper Nipsey Hussle.
No matter happy or sad, good or bad, people gon' talk about.
Just minutes later, a man walked up to Nipsey and a few others outside their store and opened fire. Nipsey was shot in the leg, stomach, and back of his head before the gunman ran off. It was hard for many to believe that he was gunned down in the same neighborhood he had worked over a decade to make a better place. The support for Nipsey's passing reached farther than just the hip-hop community, as he represented a lot more than just his music. That was Nipsey Hussle's last day with us, but before his passing, he ensured everyone understood that the marathon would continue.
Best thing you can do for a person is to inspire. That's the best currency you can offer them, inspiration. And so when a person can rely on you for that, that empowers them.